For a very long time, Libra has been moving at a slower pace than the world around you. Not slow because you weren't capable, but because some souls are born to feel more deeply before they move forward. Maybe you've wondered why things seem to arrive later for you, why your effort wasn't recognized right away, why kindness was sometimes misunderstood. Those questions were never loud. They lived quietly, in still nights, when you were alone with your own thoughts. This long pause was not a punishment. It was more like a closed room where the light hadn't been turned on yet, but everything inside was slowly taking shape. In that space, you learned how to listen to yourself when there was no applause. You learned how to stand steady when no one told you that you were doing well. Libra has walked through days like that, quietly adjusting, quietly healing, quietly growing. Some wounds leave no scars on the skin, yet they settle deeply in the heart. Being overlooked, being misunderstood, being underestimated. All of it made you question where your true value really lived. And yet, it was in those very moments that you learned the most important truth of all. Real worth does not need noise to exist. If you look closely now, you may notice that this silence was like the very early morning. Everything still dim, the air still cold, but the sky already beginning to change color. No one rushes that moment. Everything knows that light arrives in its own time. So do you. You were held back not to be forgotten, but to keep you from being swept away before you were ready. The world can be loud, it can be impatient, but the universe never rushes. It is patient with souls that need time to fully ripen. In that quiet, you learn to love balance. Not balance to please everyone, but balance between giving and keeping, between trusting others and trusting yourself. You began to see that gentleness is not weakness, and that stepping back, sometimes, is the only way to see the whole picture. These lessons were never flashy, but they were steady. They built a foundation for someone who can remain grounded when real light finally arrives. Maybe you never told anyone what it felt like to stand on the sidelines, watching life move past, wondering when it would be your turn. But that very feeling shaped you into someone deeper, more compassionate, more aware of the human journey. You know what it feels like not to be seen. So, when the moment comes, you become the one who truly sees others. You understand the pain of silence, and because of that, your words carry healing. This long pause was like a deep breath life asked you to take. At first, that breath may have felt lonely, but it also opened your lungs wider. It strengthened your heart. As you breathed out, you released old doubts. As you breathed in, you sensed something subtle shifting, like a familiar signal returning after a long absence. And while you were still standing there, in what felt like endless quiet, something important was happening. What once slowed you down was beginning to make room for a different rhythm. Not rushed, but clearer. As if someone gently pulled back the curtain, not letting the light rush in all at once, but giving your eyes time to adjust, giving your heart time to recognize that you are now ready to be seen in a way that is entirely your own. And in that moment, something very unfamiliar appears. Not an explosion, not celebration, but a slow warmth spreading through your chest, like realizing quietly that you were never truly alone, even during the times you believed the whole world had turned away. There were days when you moved through life feeling like a shadow. You showed up, you listened, you gave, and yet, it felt as if no one ever truly stopped to look deeply into who you are. That feeling was never loud. It lived softly, like a sadness folded neatly into a pocket, carried with you each day. You wondered if you were too gentle in a world that favors noise, too refined among rough edges, too deep in an era that passes over everything too quickly. But the truth is, some ways of being are not meant to be noticed immediately. There are forms of attention that don't come from people, but from the deeper layers of life itself. You have always been observed, not with curiosity, but with understanding. Your energy does not announce itself. It spreads, like a subtle fragrance in a quiet room. No one notices it right away. But once it's gone, its absence is unmistakable. Some values can only be felt when someone is willing to slow down long enough, and you carry exactly that kind of value within you. Perhaps that is why you were overlooked in fast-moving races. Not because you were lacking, but because you do not belong to places that measure everything by speed alone. You carry depth, And depth always requires time to be truly seen. What you believe in, what you protect. The boundaries you quietly set for yourself. All of it forms a field of energy that is discreet, reserved, and incredibly resilient. And then one day, you begin to realize that the feeling of being forgotten was shaped by an old perspective. In truth, there were many moments when you were noticed, remembered, just not in the ways you expected. Someone leaned on you without ever saying it out loud. Someone learned kindness from you through silence alone. Some doors did not open back then, only because they were waiting for you to arrive strong enough to step through without losing yourself inside. You were never invisible. You were simply existing on a different frequency, where light does not strike the eyes directly, but slowly reaches the heart. And when you begin to trust that truth, a very gentle shift takes place. You stop trying to be seen. You stop shrinking yourself out of fear of being misunderstood. You settle into yourself, with the calm of someone who knows that true worth does not need to knock. The world, in the most natural way, begins to adjust its rhythm around you. Eyes linger longer. Encounters carry more depth. Words reach places they never reached before. Not because you changed to fit in, but because you finally allowed yourself to be exactly who you are. And in that quiet, luminous stillness, something becomes increasingly clear. When you are no longer afraid of being forgotten. When you no longer doubt your right to exist. The doors that once remained closed begin to move ever so slightly, as if they too have recognized that you are now ready to walk through. And then, while you continue living calmly within this new rhythm, something begins to move on the other side of what once felt like an unmoving wall. No noise, no warning. Just a vague sensation, like standing in front of a door that has been closed for a long time and suddenly realizing the air behind it no longer feels heavy. You don't hear the lock turning, but you feel the shift, in the space around you, in your own breath. The things that were once delayed did not disappear. They were simply waiting for the right moment to return in a different form. It might be a conversation that seems ordinary at first, yet lingers long after it ends. It might be a message that arrives later than expected, but reaches you exactly when you've stopped waiting for it. It might be a different look from someone who once didn't understand you. Everything happens so gently that if you are not still enough, you might miss it. Libra does not need to push the door open. You don't need to prove that you deserve to walk through. These doors do not open because you knock hard enough, but because you've changed the way you stand before them. When you stop rushing, when you stop doubting, when you stop asking whether you're on the wrong path, that steadiness becomes the key you didn't even realize you were holding. Something important is happening here. You are no longer being seen only for your potential, but for your readiness. People begin to sense the depth in the way you speak, the calm in the way you respond, the clarity in the boundaries you quietly maintain. These qualities cannot be faked. They cannot be rushed. They arrive only after long stretches of silence that you've already lived through. You may notice that you no longer feel the need to fight the way you once did. Not because you've given up, but because you understand that what truly belongs to you will never require force. When you allow yourself to step forward, not with defense, but with just enough openness, the world responds with opportunities of matching depth. Some doors open that do not lead to noisy places, but guide you back to your rightful position. Some invitations arrive without display, yet carry genuine respect. Some steps forward do not demand that you sacrifice your peace, but instead help you preserve it. And you begin to understand that this is what alignment actually feels like for you. In that moment, you realize that stepping forward does not mean changing who you are. You don't need to speak louder. You don't need to become sharper to be acknowledged. All that is required is your full presence, carrying everything you've refined in silence. And naturally, everything around you finds its place. As you stand there, among movements that are subtle yet undeniably real, a sense of calm settles in. Not absolute certainty, but a quiet confidence that you are moving in the right direction. As if life itself has sent you a discreet signal. That what was once locked away was never meant to stop you. It was meant to make sure that when those doors finally open, you are ready to walk through without losing yourself along the way. And as those doors begin to open, something deeply important is happening inside you, far quieter than any movement in the outer world. You start to realize that the feeling of being seen is no longer something you wait for in other people's eyes. It rises from a much deeper place, a place where you stop asking whether you are enough. There are mornings now when you wake up and no longer feel the need to become someone else just to deserve the day ahead. That moment alone is already a profound shift. Libra has always been familiar with weighing things carefully, comparing, adjusting yourself to keep the peace. But perhaps because of that, you once forgot something essential. That real recognition does not come from pleasing everyone, but from whether you are still standing on your own side. When you begin to face yourself in silence, without judgment, without denial, you touch a gentleness that is deeply real. This is not weakness. It is the wisdom of someone who understands that love does not require fighting against who you are. Some things you once thought were flaws now appear under a different light. Sensitivity is no longer a burden, but the ability to perceive what others overlook. Caution is no longer hesitation, but the depth of someone who knows how to see one step further ahead. When you allow yourself to accept all of it, without filtering, without hiding, a very unfamiliar peace settles in, as if you've returned home after a long journey, only then realizing how far you've actually traveled. Within that acceptance, you stop chasing external validation at any cost. You no longer feel compelled to explain who you are. You no longer rush to prove your worth. You stand still, not because of fear, but because you know you are exactly where you belong. And in that stillness, the world begins to reflect you differently. Words of recognition no longer surprise you. They feel more like a gentle confirmation of something you have known deep inside for a long time. There is a quiet beauty in this moment, the beauty of someone who has passed through enough doubt to no longer guard their heart. You speak more slowly, yet with greater clarity. You listen more deeply, without losing yourself inside someone else's story. Each decision you make carries a new kind of balance. Not balance to avoid conflict, but balance that protects your true values. And as you live with that clarity, you begin to see that being seen does not have to be loud. It can arrive in a gaze that lingers, in words that are fully heard, in the feeling of being respected without having to demand it. These small moments gather quietly, forming a steady foundation, a place where you no longer fear being forgotten, because you are fully present in your own life. Perhaps this is when you finally understand that this journey was never really about someone else seeing you. It was always about you seeing yourself first. And when that happens, everything outside becomes lighter, more natural, as if life is now working with you instead of testing you. You are no longer standing at the edge, and you no longer need to push your way to the center. You are simply here, with the calm of someone who has found their inner ground. And within that calm, a very gentle current begins to guide you forward, without pressure, without force. Just a clear knowing that what is coming will not require you to trade away the peace you have just reclaimed. As if everything you've lived through is quietly settling behind you, opening a new space ahead, a space where you step forward with an open heart and a steady trust that you are ready for what is waiting. And as you begin to walk with this new sense of steadiness, something very natural starts to happen. What was once nurtured in silence, what you cared for without expecting praise, suddenly finds room to breathe, not in a showy way. But, like a garden after a long season of rain, the soil softens, and the seeds somehow know it is time to rise. You realize you no longer need to become someone else to be recognized, because what is most authentic in you is finally being seen. Your talent never disappeared. It was only covered by worries, by the fear of being misunderstood, by the habit of making yourself smaller to keep the peace. Now, as you stand in the right place, that talent begins to shine in a way that is uniquely yours. It may be the way you handle problems with a rare sense of fairness. It may be how you connect people with subtlety, listening without judgment. It may be your ability to see solutions where others see only conflict. These qualities are not loud, but they are enduring, and because of that, they create lasting value. In your work, you begin to feel a shift, very gentle, yet unmistakably real. Conversations carry more respect. Opportunities no longer confuse you. They invite calm consideration instead. You no longer accept everything just to prove that you are worthy. You choose what aligns with your rhythm and with your values. And when you choose that way, the flow of finances becomes more stable, not because of sudden luck, but because you built your foundation on clarity and consistency. In relationships, a subtle transformation takes place. You are no longer the one carrying everyone else's emotions. You give without draining yourself. You listen without losing your inner voice. Balance returns. Not as constant compromise, but as a state where both sides are respected. Relationships that no longer fit quietly drift away. No drama, no resentment. The ones that remain carry a sense of safety and emotional maturity. There is a quiet beauty in living true to your nature. You do not need to shine brightly to draw attention. Your light is steady, strong enough to warm, clear enough to guide. People begin to come toward you not for glamour, but for the feeling of trust they experience in your presence. They sense that you do not judge, you do not impose, and you are not easily shaken. This is a kind of light formed through experience, through knowing yourself, through understanding life. Within this stability, you begin to feel life slow down in the most comfortable way. You are no longer pulled in every direction. You know when to move forward, when to pause, when to wait. This balance does not come from theory. It comes from the falls that taught you what truly matters. You understand that success does not have to come with tension, and that safety does not mean standing still. There is a path in between, where you continue to grow while keeping your peace intact. You may not have named all of these changes yet, but you feel them in the way you breathe, in how you enter a room, in how you say no without guilt. These small moments accumulate, forming a solid foundation for the life you are building. And you begin to trust that what you have now is not compensation for difficult days in the past. It is the natural result of not abandoning yourself. Within this gentle light, a very real sense of stability spreads, not slowing you down, but making every step more certain, as if life itself is inviting you to keep moving forward. No rush, no doubt. Just carrying everything you have become, stepping into new experiences with a full heart, and a quiet confidence that you are exactly where you are meant to be. And within that stability, something very gentle, yet very deep, begins to take place. You start to realize that you no longer feel the need to hide, not from other people's eyes, not from difficult questions, and not from yourself. There were years when you grew used to making yourself smaller, speaking less than you truly felt, moving more slowly than your actual capacity, all just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. But now, that habit begins to fade, like a thin layer of morning mist dissolving once the sun rises high enough. You allow yourself to be fully present in each moment. When you enter a space, you no longer scan the room, wondering who you need to be in order to belong. You carry a calm forged through time, and a confidence that does not need to prove itself. You speak when it feels right. You remain silent when it feels right. Not out of fear of judgment, but out of respect for your own natural rhythm. There is a quiet freedom in the way you show up now, and that very calm makes others feel safe in your presence. The more truthful you become, the more you realize that you lose nothing. In fact, you are received more deeply. Relationships are no longer built on the roles you perform, but on genuine resonance. You don't need to please everyone, and you no longer feel guilty for setting boundaries. Those boundaries are not walls. They are invitations for those who truly respect who you are. There are moments when you suddenly notice yourself smiling without any clear reason, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. You allow yourself strong days and fragile ones, moments of certainty, and moments that ask you to pause. This sense of wholeness makes your light feel real, not blinding, but enduring, not seeking attention, yet steady enough to illuminate the road ahead. As you live this way, the world responds with remarkable subtlety. People no longer see you as a secondary option, but as a presence they can rely on. Opportunities arrive without asking you to sacrifice your true nature. Invitations come carrying respect, not pressure. You no longer need to strain to prove your worth, because that worth is already visible in how you live, how you listen, how you choose. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this chapter is that you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You don't have to justify your gentleness. You don't have to apologize for your clarity. You understand that not everyone will understand you, and that truth no longer wounds you. You choose to stay with places, with people, with work that allows you to be yourself, without trading away your peace. And in this full presence, you begin to sense a new rhythm of life, slower, deeper, more meaningful. You no longer chase recognition, yet recognition finds you. You don't search for light, yet light reflects from the way you live. There is a very clear knowing that you are standing exactly where you belong, not higher, not lower, just right. When you no longer hide, you also stop fearing being seen. You understand that the right kind of attention will not take away your privacy, but will honor your true self. You move forward with a quiet confidence, carrying everything you learned from those long seasons of silence. And in each step, there is a belief, soft but unwavering, that living fully is not only a gift you give yourself, but also a way you bring kindness and balance into the world around you. And then, when everything that needed to settle has finally settled, when everything that needed healing has softened, you suddenly realize you are no longer standing at the edge of waiting. Not because you forced yourself forward, but because the moment arrived naturally, like a morning after a long night when you open your eyes and simply know you are in a different day. The waiting, the thing that once exhausted you, that once made you doubt yourself, now closes quietly. No applause, no dramatic milestone. Just a clear, steady knowing that you are ready to live your own life, not merely watch it from the sidelines. You begin to walk with a different state of mind. No more hesitation. No more asking permission to exist. You understand now that your place is not something granted by others, but something you naturally occupy when you live in alignment with your values. Some people begin to look at you differently, not because you changed to please them, but because you stopped hiding who you truly are. Respect arrives naturally, as a result, not as a goal. This new cycle does not promise that everything will be easy, but it offers something far more important: clarity. You know who you are, you know what you want, and you no longer trade your peace for approval. You step into your work with intention, into relationships with discernment, into life with full presence. What no longer fits quietly falls away. What remains has depth, meaning, and mutual respect. There is a calm steadiness in the way you now face the future. You no longer need to look back at the past with regret. Every pause, every delay, every wound, all of it helped bring you here. They did not weaken you. They taught you how to stand tall without becoming rigid, how to open your heart without losing yourself. You carry those lessons with you as light luggage. Not heavy, not haunting, just enough to remind you how far you've come. And in this new cycle, you allow yourself to trust the intuition sharpened through silence, to trust value that does not need to be loud, to trust that what is meant for you will arrive when you walk with sincerity. You do not need to run. You do not need to wait. You only need to keep moving forward at your own pace, knowing that each step places you exactly where you belong. There may still be moments of hesitation. That is human. But the difference now is that hesitation no longer holds you back. You listen to it, and then you continue walking. You understand that light is not something that blinds you, but something that helps you see more clearly. And you choose that light, not because it is flashy, but because it is true. As this story gently settles, what remains is not a promise, but a deep sense of peace. You no longer need to ask when you will be seen. You are already being seen. In every conscious choice, in every moment, you live in truth with yourself. This new cycle does not begin with a grand door opening, but with a steady step forward, and you are here, with enough trust, enough courage, enough gentleness, to keep moving ahead, carrying the quiet, unmistakable light of a Libra who has finally found their rightful place in life.